So right now we want to take a look at how we have fared as a nation in the area of our economy. Of course, many of us are aware that the government at the center, the federal government, is standing on a tripod, which is fighting corruption, securing the nation, and fixing the economy. If you ask me, I would say they all find a way to tie themselves together one after the other. And of course, there have been a lot of issues that have been raised over the past 12 months and counting. The latest is the Fitch ratings that gave Nigeria a particular rating sometime in the middle of the year, and now it's kind of reviewed. You may want to find out why. That's why we are in the studio this morning, and we'd like to speak with two economists, Mr. Alaba Olushimori. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
As well as Mr. Oji Demezwe. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation this morning.
Thank you.
So let's sink straight into it. Let me begin with you, Mr. Olushimori. What's your assessment of Nigeria's economy as the year winds down between January and now?
The economy is becoming more and more stable. You know, we went through an election year. In an election year, a lot of challenges, nothing moves. Again, coupled with the fact that we have serious security challenges. And I'm one of those people who we stand on the ground that without actually resolving frontally the issue of insecurity in the country, honestly, our attempt to make rapid progress economic-wise will be short-lived. Not less than half of the country are having crisis. And in an economy where you cannot move, 30 kilometers, 50 kilometers without, worrying about your life and your properties, you are moving around. Of course, internal confidence, it will be eroded, let alone external investors coming in to do business. But having said that, I believe very strongly when I came in May, I told you that if there's going to be any improvement, 2020, 2021 will likely be those 2 years that we may record significant improvement. By the time we get into 2021, 2022, we'll be talking about another transition.
Some are going to be wondering what you're talking about here because, this is 2019 going into 2020. Yeah. Talking about 2022 for them is far-fetched.
Yeah, no, I said from 2020 to 2021, there'll be I believe that there'll be dramatic improvement.
On what basis?
On the basis, number one, is that whether you like it or not, in terms of leadership, the health of the president has improved. We cannot ignore the fact that over the past 4 years, until recently, he had a lot of health issues. And there's no way that once you have a leadership has a challenge with his health, it will affect the way he manages the economy. I believe it's a major factor. I also mentioned the issue of insecurity. I believe that insecurity is easing up. I'm not saying that it's finally eradicated, but I'm saying that it's going to ease up in 2020 and 2021.
Just one thing
saying that, yeah.
I'd like to clear. I'm still at that point where you said that it is stable. That's the economy. Pardon me here.
Yeah.
What indices? Why would you say the economy is stable? What are the parameters you use to say?
I'm saying 2 years ago, we were talking about recession. We're having negative growth in our GDP.
Right.
But in the last, let's say the last 1 year, we're talking about close to 2% growth in GDP. For 2019, we're talking about 2.3%. Next year, 2.4% growth in GDP. So that's on basis of that. If I'm moving away from a recession, to a point where we're talking about a positive growth, that, of course, that will be by stability. Of course, the central bank is also doing a lot.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Details, in a bit. But
let me so in general, I'm saying that we're moving away from a pure recession. We have been sliding down consistently in our GDP growth rate now to a point where we cleared the negative growth, and of course we are in positive growth now.
Okay.
It's not where we are And again, if you look at globally,
let's allow Mr. Udebeze
okay.
to weigh in. Just what are your opening comments? He believes that the economy is, as you say, bullish.
The Nigerian economy is, in my mind, performing abysmally poorly, and that's my summary comment. Dr. Alaba has a positive outlook to things, and I also do. I believe that Nigeria can get better. But in scoring the economy poor, I want to remind us that this is an economy that has a capacity to do more than 10% growth in GDP. This is an economy that this current government met at about 5% growth. Nigeria had done average of 6% between 2004 to 2014. Yes, we are aware that the oil price came down seriously from $110 per barrel around 2013, 2014, down to 2015 when we saw it at below $40 per barrel. But we met this economy as at 2015 at 5% growth. And due to a lot of lack of leadership, lack of inaction by this government, they dragged this economy down to a negative position.
Was a recession also due to lack of what you call leadership?
The recession happened because we were unable to handle issues as they came, in 20. Don't forget where we're coming from. This government took over initially, and when we had a smooth transition, I like to, history is very important. If we cannot go back to trace things from, how things that happened to us, we can't get anything corrected. This government took over on a very high goodwill because we thought, in fact, the world had predicted, if you don't forget, America had predicted that Nigeria would break up as a nation or will fail woefully as a nation in 2015 because they saw an impossible transition, from PDP to another government, assuming that President Buhari won. And he did win. Are you following me?
Right,
and then we had a government, a tension-soaked situation where people thought that the then incumbent president would not hand over to him. And this man made a call, the magical call, and said he wasn't going to fight anything. And then from a point of very, despondent situation, people thought there would be a crisis, there would be what people had bought ammunition, everywhere was charged up, the whole balloon was busted. And this country had a very powerful goodwill. From Bloomberg to every other platform you could take, Focus Economics, there was positive goodwill, and very many investors pulled a lot of dollars waiting for Nigeria to take action. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the line, we deflated the whole goodwill.
There's something that you haven't really, one moment. There's something you haven't really squared on, and I'd like you to just chew on it for a bit, which is, what Kaude asked the other time. You haven't factored in the fact that there was a recession building up seriously before this government took over. But we'll come to that. I understand we have another guest, waiting for us on Skype, another economist, Mr. Bogo Adi. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So, first of all, what are your own opening comments on the state of Nigeria's economy, one of the tripod on which the federal government stands as it is today?
Thank you very much for having me on the program. Well, like the second speaker said, the economy is not performing as everybody expected. In fact, it's performing below potential. Currently, the average growth in 2019 has been 1.9%. And given the state of infrastructure and the state of both our fiscal and macroeconomic dynamics, we should hit a potential GDP growth of about 3%. Which will give us a kind of a head up above the population growth rate. But we've not managed to achieve that. So given that, and then that has been over the period. I don't want to go back to the pre-recession and recession period. That's a long time ago. We've gone beyond that. So I want to dwell on what has transpired in 2019 and maybe in 2018, because when we came out from the recession in the beginning of 2017, so we thought that in any way we could hit some significant growth that will push the economy forward and begin to lift the various sectors up. But that has not managed to happen. So other years, like I keep saying, this is not the last recession, wasn't the first, nor the second, or the third, or fourth. That was the fifth recession we've had in our history as an independent nation, as an independent economy. So each time we've had a recession in the past, when we come out from that, the post-recession growth managed to hit sometimes an average of 6%. But this time around, it's been, like the second speaker said, it's been abysmally poor. We've not managed anything above 2%. And in fact, it went from 2% to 1.7 and then an average of 1.9 last year. So that is not a good indication. And then we're talking about the Fitch rating. I know you're going to come to that. So we have a whole lot of problems on the economy right now. But then there are some areas that we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. So I'll be speaking to that, but given what the statistics, given the various indicators, are we looking at the misery index or whatever, the poverty level? Nobody can say that the economy has done well in 2019.
Well, Mr. Bogwadi, let's bring it quickly back to you. Since you have broached the issue of the Fitch ratings, let me take that up on Mr. Alaba Olushimore. What's your assessment? You know, how important or how relevant should Nigerians be concerned about the Fitch ratings? You know, just as you said, I mean, it was earlier in the year some rating and then this one, and it doesn't sound good to many people.
Well, we should be concerned. I mean, I'm a banker and also an analyst, credit analyst for that matter. When you have an external party accessing you, it's not prejudiced, it's not part of your problem. He should be able to see that problem from a neutral perspective. So that is the reason why we need to be concerned about their rating. Of course, the overall rating is not bad. We are looking at the short-run implication of the environment. But what I'm saying is, in all of these things that we're talking about, really, you can't assess an economy without the environment under which we're operating. And of course, we are actually not been talking about that area. Globally, what is the growth rate of GDP? You know, I mean, talking about globally. Are you talking about 5% all over the world? I'm talking about global, economic growth. So you find that the challenge that we are having in terms of economic growth is not limited to Nigeria.
What do you think informed the negative rating that Fitch has given us now?
In the first instance, like I said, the environment, the polity, these are two critical factors that you need to consider when you are rating, carrying out a sovereign risk rating.
When you say polity, what exactly are you talking about?
Well, yes, we had a transition from one government to another, but you cannot actually remove the fact that in terms of stability, the government, maybe until recently, was all that stable. Yes, they won the election, but there are a lot of distractions here and there. And also mentioned the fact that where our president had health issues. You can't remove, you can't close your eyes away from those challenges.
If our institutions are working,
you got to have leadership.
If our institutions are working, do we really need one person? Do we have to depend on just
one
individual?
We are a developing economy, and with the kind of democracy we are operating, we have a very strong president. Yes, we're all saying is that institutions, but the fact remains that in Nigeria today, you find that the legislature, the judiciary, they are not independent of the executive. That's the truth of the matter. I'm not saying that that's what ought to be, but that's not what it is.
Okay.
I see, Mr. warming up to getting now.
Is that what?
No, you're gone.
Let's not forget that these rating agencies have their parameters and their reasons for giving any rate they give out. A few weeks back, about 3 weeks ago, we had Moody's do the same thing. They downgraded Nigeria, and then just about now, last week, Fitch did the same thing. And they were very particular about why they did that. It's not about the president or whatever. They were concerned about macroeconomic policies of the country, both fiscal policies and monetary policies. They were concerned that Nigeria has not been up to speed in trying to do the reforms that we need to get us to where we're going to. They are concerned that our economic policies are not exciting at all to drive growth, to attract investment. They are concerned that the Central Bank of Nigeria, even though they're not doing badly, in my whole assessment of what they're doing, but in terms of FX management, they have been involved in a very high cost policy implementation in trying to hold the nominal value of our FX. And I've said this over the years. The central bank has been bleeding this country to death in trying to manage the nominal price of our currency. Naira is strong, as it were, relatively strong now. It has stabilized over the period, but at what cost? According to Fitch, the policy cost of that is very huge on this country. And I know that very well too. We spend billions of dollars trying to intervene in a market where we have a very high potential to attract, very, nice, good supply. Nigeria abysmally has dropped in FDI inflow. If you read the report, we do barely $200 million, in a quarter. A country that should be doing, compared to Ghana, Kenya, and the rest of them, we shouldn't be doing anything less than $3 billion.
But what do you think is responsible? Sorry, Mr. Olushimo. What do you think is responsible?
I'm still trying to make sure the issue that
we
can get there.
Yes, we'll get there. But what do you think is responsible for this negative rating beside this whole thing? Because no. So on the one hand, we're talking about the government at the center being, of course, being the leader of all. But then we haven't really talked about the contribution of other units.
Now, the concern of Fitch is that the country is going into higher level of debt. We are running a very high fiscal deficit, and we have a poor revenue situation. Even though government is trying to deal with that by increasing VAT, which will even worsen our situation as it were. I'm going to come to that. But we are entering into further debt. And what I call it now is that we have a National Assembly which is supporting the president very well, which is good. We have a budget. It's quite commendable that by now our budget has been passed into law. I love that. But the way it's also going, I think Nigeria is on a highway to hell. Economically, because approvals are being given for even debt situation. Very soon, the president will pass to the National Assembly another debt plan, and they're going to approve about $22.9 billion. The second tranche of $29 billion that we planned earlier, which the last Senate did not approve.
You said the other time that we have a poor revenue situation. In other words, we're churning in revenue. Our internal generated revenue is very, very low.
Total revenue actual is less than 5 trillion in the past budget.
How should government address that? If this can, we
will come to how, but you want to understand why Fitch gave us what downgraded us. The outlook for them is poor because we are going into on the fast lane to more borrowing. Our revenue potential is very poor. And our debt, service ratio is not looking good at all.
Sorry, Mr. Williams. Okay. You know why I punctuate you?
Okay.
The man on the street is wondering
how
does Fitch ratings affect him or her?
Okay, how does it affect us? Now, let's look at that. When Fitch says the outlook for your economy is negative, are you following me? It means that your country is, at a higher risk of not meeting its obligation. Let's break it down to the common man in the street. It means that we are getting riskier. That if we have any debt, for government to provide food, to provide infrastructure, to build this economy, to grow even to the level where the economists from Abuja said 3% to 4%. To do that, we need to carry out government activities, meaning that we have to be able to raise money. And when you cannot fund your budget, we've been running deficit budget for the past 3 years. It means you have to borrow, and to borrow with a negative rating or outlook, every investor in your instrument will price you much, much lower for your instrument. If when we issue a bond or any kind of paper, treasury bill and all of that, they are discount instruments. And if you have a face value of, let's say, 100 naira, if your rating is good, somebody can buy the paper from you for, let's say, 94 naira. That means you're able to raise 94 naira for every 100 naira paper you issue out. Because you have a good rating. In fact, if you have a fantastic rating, somebody can even buy it for 98 naira. Okay. Now, with a very poor rating, I want to explain it in a way people can understand.
Okay.
With a very poor rating, you become a riskier country, and your instruments are going to be deeply discounted. Your bonds are going to be seen in the international market as junk bonds. If we haven't got to that stage yet, we are B- is still not very bad. But what this rating means is that Nigerian instruments are going to be priced very lowly, and we will raise less fund with that, and it will flow into the banking sector because a lot of banks are holding government instruments. These instruments are rated to be likely to default, and for banks too, the outlook means that investors, when you say a negative rating, investors around the world who are meant to inflow money into Nigeria will have less, more concern about making that investment, and therefore several sectors will not get as much inflow of capital, whether foreign direct or foreign portfolio, into Nigeria. Right. And when that happens, it will drill down to the banking sector where a lot of investment will not prosper. Banks will begin to have higher level of delinquent assets. That's what we call non-performing loans. And when that happens, bank customers will not meet their obligations. Banking system will weaken. Okay. Unemployment. There's a whole lot. I can explain it if you give me time. A whole lot of things that can happen. But it's a chain reaction.
So let's bring in Mr. Bongwade. He joins us from Skype, from Imo State actually, and not in Abuja, and get him to weigh into some of the issues you have raised. Now, look at Mr. Bongwade. Looking at that Fitch Ratings report, they actually mentioned what they call economically costly policy measures by the CBN and some other issues. Now, our analysts in the studio have raised, divergent opinion. But now that you want to get into it, what do you think about the Fitch rating? And in the light of the government's move, perhaps, to boost infrastructure, you see the borrowing plan. And I'd also like you to add what this might mean to our prospects in the international market when we go to actually secure these loans.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the second speaker is quite on point. The basis for the Fitch rating, okay, I can point about a couple of them. 40% of our FX reserves are just foreign portfolio investment in CBN, OMO. Now, you need to understand the implication of having the bulk of your FX denominated in FPI, not foreign direct investment. Now, when you have bulk 40% in FPI, it means that you have a very risky macroeconomic system. Not much needs to happen before investors begin to vote with their feet. And once that happens, there is going to be a drain on your external reserve. And that has already happened. And the Fitch noticed that our FX reserve is dropping at a worrying fast rate. Okay, foreign investment bodies are expecting a devaluation of naira. Also, they pointed to our current account deficit that seems to be rising. That's the difference between our import and our export. So, if our current account is growing in deficit, that's a very big problem for the foreign exchange market. Now, I want you to understand the implications of all of this because it is not lost on the man, even on the man on the streets. You see, so inflation is expected to keep rising this year as a result of that. So if you focus on the external sector where we have the current account deficit, you will know that there are some worrying tendencies. Yes, like the second speaker also pointed out, Fitch noted that the government debt is about 7 times our revenue. So we are not able to even service the loans that we are accumulating. So when you put all this together, so you have an economy that is kind of sitting on the keg of gunpowder. So not much needs to happen before we actually lose it once again. Now, the question is, how do we get ourselves out of all this mess? Now, I can see that internationally, we can see that the headwind seems to be dissipating a little bit. There's some bit of tailwind in the sense that interest rates all over the world seems to be lower. And you can see that the federal government has cashed in on that by nominating and the debt consolidation by, trying to...
Just before you go into the details of how we get out, how we get back into the positive ratings of Fitch at this point, we need to take a break to take some messages, and when we come back, we can begin to look at some solutions, including some other aspects of the Nigerian economy. Please stay with us. Still taking a look at Nigeria's economic standing in the year 2019, as well as preview in the year 2020. Markwe has a question for our guests. Markwe.
Oh, yes, indeed. And I think that let's quickly take this one from one of our viewers. But before I go to the one from our viewers, I'd like us to look at the basis upon which we have been downgraded. Now, Fitch says it's owing to the central bank's complex regulatory measures, rise in debt, low fiscal revenue, and inflation. Now, the rise in debt has given a number of people concern. However, would you say that we have another way out, considering the fact that the diversification which the country intends to make some revenue from hasn't quite materialized yet, and all revenues are moving up quite slowly? Did we have another option than to take on more loans for infrastructure development?
Definitely we do. We do if we get serious as a country. Now, when you have a situation where your revenue cannot fund, your expenditure, budget is all about how much do we plan to spend. In 2020, we plan to spend about 10.6 trillion naira. In reality, in 2018, 2019, we've not exceeded 4 to 4.5 trillion naira in revenue. Even though in 2020, we estimate to make about 8 trillion, leaving us with about 2 trillion, to be funded with debt. But the reality is that we haven't been able to exceed 4.5 to 5 trillion. So we always have to now borrow to fund the budget. Now, in our question, is there a way out we can, avoid borrowing or curtail borrowing or raise more money? I say yes. One is that when you have a problem of generating revenue, then you must critically look at your expenditure and your lifestyle. We have a government that is still very bloated, very heavy. We still have a political class that travel around with retinue of staff and all of that. We have public service that is heavily, bloated and is inefficient. We have, aides and aides to aides, personal assistant to aid, and all of those. We haven't dealt with that. Yeah, that's a good measure, but we haven't seen any significant drop in the size of government.
But the question usually is, how much will that even take out of the whole budget? How much?
It will, because our recurrent expenditure is always, when we see the plan, you always see recurrent expenditure looking like 70%. And we fix it like this 2020, we have about 2.6 trillion in capital expenditure. If you compare that to 10 trillion spending, that's about, let's say, 20%. But in reality, we don't do 5 to 10% capital expenditure. Yeah. So recurrent expenditure, apart from debt service and other statutory transfers, the amount we spend in salaries and lifestyle and spending salary payment, remember? And even with increase in salary, is huge beyond what we said.
So the point I'm making is that it takes, we've been on this thing for a very long time. This issue of high level of recurrent expenditure, it can be wiped up overnight. The truth of the matter is that if you are coming out of recession, there's no way you not borrow.
But generally, you haven't spoken to the issue she raised, the reasons given by Fitch.
She's asking, what can we do?
What can we do?
Yes. To reduce borrowing.
To reduce borrowing. Yeah. I'm saying that you cannot borrow when you are moving away from recession. It's all over the world that you need to actually, somebody said, spend your way out of recession. All right? What is important is that you are not borrowing for consumption. You are borrowing for capital expenditure. I think what you concern us, analysts, is that when they said we are borrowing 2-point-something trillion naira to execute some projects, let us see what are these projects and ensure we monitor the project over their life cycle. What we have seen over the years is that monies are budgeted for projects, capital expenditures, but at the end of the day, nothing is done.
Exactly my point.
So what I'm saying is that I said it's our duty, your duty as journalists, to ensure that we monitor these projects. Were they actually executed? Another tranche of budget going to come up towards the end of 2020. Let's see what have we done with this money at the end of the day. So the issue of recurrent expenditure is not something you can solve overnight. We have a very complex economy. Fitch can say whatever they are saying, but our geopolitics, our sociology, psychology, and everything is different from what they are having over there. So, and the way we solve our problem will be different. I'm not the government officials, but I'm just saying that it is not as easy as people look at this challenges outside.
My question has some question for you. Mark, go ahead.
Oh, yes, indeed. Perhaps journalists have a job to, follow up and see that the projects are executed. But beyond that, are we also monitoring as Nigerians to ensure that these projects can actually pay back the monies with which they were borrowed? I mean, take, for instance, the Abuja-Kaduna rail line, which is now in operation and which, Nigeria borrowed heavily to ensure that that rail line came to fruition. The manner in which we're running it today, is it in such a way that that rail line can pay back the monies, which we borrowed to establish it? Have we been able to say very clearly that this is what we intend, or this is the reason we are borrowing this money, and this is how we intend to pay back? There are huge questions on that, Mr. Laba, but let me also add this. This is from Olufemi Adiagbo, who is saying that we inherited an economy in 2015, which was a corruption-laden cesspool with huge infrastructure deficits and headed to recession, as admitted by the then Minister of Finance. He says our guests should not rewrite history. There are long-term economic consequences for bad practices. Would you also agree with those who say that we're still reaping the fruit of not saving when we had a windfall, when oil was, well above $100 per barrel?
No doubt about it. Whatever we are facing today is the consequences of our past years of proliferation, of our wastefulness, of our past governments. And it's not easy to put things right within a period of 4 or 5 years. I believe, as I said the other time, very strongly, that 2020, 2021 will be a better year, and I've given the reasons. All right, I believe that the political environment will improve, the security will improve, and most of the analysis are not talking about the issue of our insecurity we have in the country. How can business thrive in an economy where there's no security of lives and property? Even, we are not talking about only the North.
You're not speaking, sorry, you are not speaking to what you said about the project repaying.
No, in a public good, you can't really, we have what we call imputed costs as well as imputed benefits. It's not a commercial good. You are talking about a rail line. Look at the benefits you're going to derive from, all right? The time you are going to save, moving from one point to another point, moving goods and people across, cities and cities and towns. That's what you should be looking at. There's no way in a public good you are talking about, making money. It's not a private commodity where you're going to price it at a commercial rate. But over in the last few months, maybe a year or so, moving from Abuja to that to Kaduna, the challenge is security. You cannot move. Now, look at the amount of money people are going to be losing if you cannot move goods from one point to another point. Yeah.
Factors in what he calls the ESG consideration.
Mr. Alushamore, indeed, the rail line should be about public good, but don't we run ourselves into double jeopardy when we borrow money to build a rail line and then we're not even able to pay back, or the monies that we make from that rail line is not able to pay back the debt? We're still subsidizing transport fares along that particular route, or not running it. Maybe we can even subsidize it. But is it not possible to run it in an efficient and transparent manner, in such a way that the monies, we can say very clearly that this is how much we hope to make from it a year, in such a way that it can pay back the debt? This is not even about profit. This is about paying back the debt which we borrowed, which we have incurred as a result of building the rail line.
It can be done. I agree with you, it can be done, even given the fact that majority of those who actually commute through that line are, people can say high-income group people. You can actually charge an economic rate that over a period, maybe a period of, and when you talk about this kind of capital projects, it's not about 5 years, you're talking about 10 years, 15 years. That's the earliest time you can recover your money from such a huge investment. It is possible, but not a commercial rate.
Now, if I want to come in here, when government borrows, basically you borrow to be able to improve the capacity of the economy to create value, to attract investments, and therefore improve business activities, and consequently be able to collect more taxes, make businesses easier, make people, goods and services move better. Now, if you talk about a particular project like the rail line, then you must, even though it's meant to serve public good, you must have your cost-benefit analysis to be sure that the money you are investing there, because it's borrowed, it can pay itself. So I agree with the question she asked about how do we make it profitable. Now, government all over the world, tend to want to move some of these investments to private sectors. But in Nigeria, we hold on to them, which is good. If we can fund these, kinds of projects, aviation, transportation, and all of that with our own money, that's fine. But if you must borrow to do it, you must be sure that, the revenue coming from it, less your expenses, must pay. You must market that product. You must be sure it's, to even start with, is it a strategic project? How does that project give rise to increased economic activity, in the country? Okay. If you can't convince yourself of that, then it's a bad investment. We have several of them running in this country, and because we are borrowing to do them, and we're not placing the money in the right place, it becomes difficult to pay. And therefore, the economy continues to go downward. She asked a question, how do we improve the situation? I looked only at the expenses. Looking at the revenue, I haven't answered that. The question is that why I recommend that we must handle our expenses, to make sure we curtail it. On revenue side, Nigeria has a lot of potential to collect more tax revenue. But the system must be put in order. Somebody said that we're suffering from past governance and issues. And I'm asking, has corruption got better under this government? Have we managed our resources better under this government? Have we put the right people in the right positions under this government? Have we seen proper use of our resources, wholesomely? In the past 4 years, let's not forget, we've had people who are laden with all manner of international corruption issues. They're still in this government. People that even this government had even on their own, prosecuted, they're still in this government. Now that's my question now is that until we get the right people in the right places, if we don't have governance is very critical for if you talk about enterprise risk management, Nigeria is a very risky country, and we haven't done anything about putting the right people at the right places, even up till now. Okay. And we're planning to do 37 billion to refurbish a building, and the president approved.
We'll come to
Nothing has got better.
We'll come to that. Markwese has a question for our guest on Skype. Markwe.
Well, if he could, I don't know if the guest on Skype can hear me, but I think that, the issue raised by one of our viewers, Mr. Diagbo, needs to be addressed, when he talked about still reaping the consequences for bad practices, the long-term consequences. Will he agree with that viewer who is saying that what we're currently experiencing is also refusing to save when we had a windfall, and that part of what is happening to us right now is the consequences for that, refusing to manage when we had the windfall and reaping the consequences right now. Would he agree?
Yeah, I do agree to a certain extent, but we cannot keep crying over spilled milk all the day. The government in power today one of the reasons they were voted into place is because they came out with some kind of, at that point in time, some convincing, political campaign that they were going to rejig the system, to get the good days back. So I think it's on such premises they were voted into power. So going back, to keep hacking back at the past, for me that is just not the way to proceed. Yes, it's true that not just in the past administration, but historically we've never done what we should do to get our economy moving forward. So we can't just pick on one government and leave the others. So if we want to keep going back, because I think that's what we like to do in this country, retrogression. So we should go back to the 1960s. We should go back to 1967. We should go back to after the years after independence, and how our Commonwealth has been frittered away by politicians, especially the military. But that's not what we're talking about today. When I spoke earlier, I said it is important for us to focus attention so that we don't get ourselves distracted to what has happened in the past 1-2 years. because that is a better, by the way, the policy cycle in Nigeria is about 18 months. So the time between a pronouncement of a policy, its implementation, and before you begin to see the results. So if a policy is implemented today, you expect to see results in the next 18 months. So we've passed that. So we shouldn't even be talking about the past. I want to dwell on what the government has done.
Okay, well, I don't know if we still have Mr. Bongoadi with us. Okay, let me quickly ask you this, Mr. Bongoadi. So all of the issues that have been raised are going in one direction or another, but let's focus on some of the things that, you know, the federal government had promised. So on the one hand is securing the economy, fighting corruption, and improving securing the nation, fighting corruption, and, you know, improving the economy. Now, one of the things that, you know, as far as anyone is concerned, would say is the economy is very, very important. We've been talking about macroeconomic issues, but we haven't really, you know, been able to look at the primary economies that affect people, a larger number of people, the SMEs, and the responsibility of the various states, the second leg of the federating units in Nigeria. How do you think we have fared at that leg of our economy, and what should we be doing? I mean, the states may not be able to talk about petroleum, but at least they can talk about other things like diversifying the economy. How do you think we fare in that leg of our economy?
Okay, so I like to refer to the statistics. Let's look at what has been happening, because when you talk about SMEs, you're talking about the real sector of the economy. All the while, we'll be talking about the nominal sector, which is the macroeconomy and its management and all of that. So when we talk about the real sector, the SMEs, the responsibility of the subnational entities on that. Of course, everybody knows that the weakest link in the chain, it remains the state, the subnational governance level. They've not ever done what they should do to support and to grow the economy. But look at, let's again, before I come back to that, let's look at what has happened in the past few months. You know, the measures that the CBN has taken to help to improve performance and outcomes in the real sector. So over the past 18 months, as I said, we've had very sluggish growth in credit sector. At a point, credit to the private sector was negative. But we've seen the new initiative that the CBN has embarked on, you know, given the new conditions, 60% LDR and all of that. So we're beginning to see some kind of improvement in the lending to the private sector. Of course, if that happens, we know that it will trigger.
Okay, but well, that's Mr. Bongoadi. What we'll hopefully to be able to have him. Now let's look forward. Let's look forward.
I'm just saying that this issue of SME thing,
yes,
really there's no two way to it. It holds the key to our economic development.
But how
wait. In the 60s or 70s, our industrialization policy was such that we were producing those who were importing before, what we call import substitution industry approach. And that means that those big industries that we established were making use of imported raw materials, double jeopardy. You find that the equipment they have to use, the raw material they have to use, have to be imported from abroad, because we're actually producing what we were importing before, rather than actually producing where you have the natural endowment. And what I'm saying is that it is the SMEs that hold the key to our economic development. Just have the Asian tigers. Now, we must move away from this issue of big corporations approach. The CBN is doing all it can actually to support the CBN itself, the BOI, the CBN through the commercial banks, actually giving loans to SMEs. But when I say SME, really I'm concerned about those that are manufacturing, not traders, not those who are actually importing goods and services, but those who are actually manufacturing or processing. We should be able to assist them. NAFDAC, for example, one of the critical agencies that must assist them with regards to the quality and the standard, and at the same as SON, Standard Organization of Nigeria, so that they can be packaged in a way that they can actually export, apart from meeting the local requirements, being able to export their goods abroad.
Okay.
Not only that, again, apart from the skill that they require, they also need to be trained. What we have seen over the years, through the central bank, is that we believe that money answers all things. We just throw money, at everything. Look at what you just said a few minutes ago. We moved from 60% loan deposit ratio to 65%. In fact, there are a lot of speculations that we may go to 70% at the end of the day. But there are other cooperating factors that must come in.
Right.
The infrastructure must be there. These also need to be trained about how to manage businesses. They need to be trained about the quality, how to meet international standards.
So whose table would you place that, the training part?
Government.
Government should train the SMEs.
Government.
Okay, let me come to
although
this.
we have been done, but
Right.
I don't know how much they are doing. What they are doing right now.
Okay.
But infrastructure is very important. Like the issue of moving goods from one place to another, our routes need to be fixed.
All right. Let me bring in Mr. Demizwe. Earlier on, you talked about taxes, and I really wanted you to explain. You said that we have potential to generate more revenue from taxes, getting more people to pay tax. So I'm asking, who are these more people that we can get taxes from? Because if you say there's money, we need to know where that money is. So
Taxing the poor.
which area do you think we can tax more?
Okay, now, we're just talking about the SMEs. No economy can grow without a very active micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, the real sector of the economy. And in Nigeria, we have a very big economy, 200 million people, a lot of small businesses, and all of those. And if we have the right environment, the right infrastructure, roads, transport system, ease of doing business, ease of registering your business and running it, removing multiple taxation, and even illegal taxation, this sector can grow. If you have access to cheap fund, central bank is trying to do that, but it can't do it alone. The commercial banking, the micro finance system must also be active in supporting the SMEs. Now, when we do that, we will have a whole lot. For every 1% government can employ, the SMEs can employ 5. And we've, in the past, used government, employment strategy to drive unemployment lower here. It cannot work. Now, if we have a very large SME section, little taxing, you don't even need to increase your VAT, because now at the point where we are, we're only going to make the situation worse by moving VAT from 5 to 7.5, because the people that are going to be paying are still those who are paying. Now, what do I mean by government can get more money through taxes?
With the threshold being 25 million, I mean, definitely.
Yeah, okay, now that's where I'll commend this government, by trying to exclude the very micro SMEs from this VAT payment. Kudos to the president.
So you still haven't answered me.
Now, my answer to your question,
we should be taxing
now,
more?
I'm saying to raise more money to improve our revenue from taxation, I'm saying that we need to widen the tax gap.
Who should come? Now, who are the people that should come?
The SMEs, the individuals. Now, let me break it down. Many people in this country
don't have much time.
Okay, now, because those who pay tax today are, one, the big companies, the Dangotes and the rest of them, and others, all of us who are working, and our companies tax us. Okay. The rest of the informal sector, the markets all over the country, people do billions and millions of transactions, they're not paying tax.
So they need to.
So we need to widen. We need to bring in more people into the tax net. Widen the tax net.
30
not
seconds. 30
tax,
seconds to close. 30 seconds.
No, what you say they are already being overtaxed. You mentioned that at the very beginning, that the SMEs are already being overtaxed. Multiple
charges. Government days, cash
so how do we reconcile?
This is an ongoing conversation, and I really wish we could continue. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, very, very much for being a part of our conversation. Alaba Olushimore, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Oju Demizwe, thank you so much. And of course, Dr. Bongo Ade, an economist and of the Lagos Business School. Thank you so much for your time, for taking time out to talk with us this morning on Nigeria's economic outlook. We're back in a moment to take another issue. Please stay with us.